Scott Grace has made every mistake in the book regarding being a man. After all, his first role model was Tarzan. In today's episode, Scott discusses his book, Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them. In this book, he strips away the misconceptions, embedded beliefs, and behaviors that no longer serve. He helps men transcend the roles, ego, habits, and relationship boxes that they find themselves stuck in. Welcome to LIFEOLOgy.
Thank you, James. I'm glad to be here.
It's so funny. When I was reading this book, or reading the information, I was like, I am looking forward to hearing this because if your first role model was Tarzan, that's quite interesting. With you, how did you realize that there may be some misconceptions or the whole aspect of toxic masculinity? How did that come about for you?
Just the buzzword. It became such a popular word in the culture. And I realized I was having a reaction to it because we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is definitely some toxicity in masculinity and in our water and in the air and in our food. It's part of life, but there's also something beautiful and pure and noble about masculinity. And I went on a search to find it and to separate that from what people are commonly now calling toxic masculinity.
Good. Exactly. What is your background in your study, or what was it in life? How did you become the expert in this?
The School of Hard Knocks. And I still haven't graduated. I keep getting left back. I studied to become a therapist, a life coach, healer, psychic. I've been in and out of all kinds of schools and trainings. And men's work was something that I did for myself. It was like I needed to learn how to trust men. And who I am as a man and who I am not, instead of trying to conform to all these roles and role models. I had to discover what's true about me and what to throw out in this sick culture that's so out of balance. Yeah. So I've been on a lifelong journey to know myself and to know who I'm not. Yes. And the book is just an explosion of my insights, of my journey. It's really like a masculinity memoir.
Wow. I've actually never spoken to someone who's written a book specifically like this, like, specifically a memoir as well. It's, I like the fact that you said, you know what you are not. I think many times people try and be everything. And so in that, they try and overcompensate. In that overcompensation, they spend so much energy trying to be something that they are not, but they don't fully accept that. And then in that moment, that's when they realize, people will give up or become very depressed because they haven't really found their authentic self. How is it for you to realize what you are not? How did you accept there's many things that you are not?
Well, through relationships, through people pleasing, through life experiences. I write about in the book. There's a chapter called "How I Got My Balls Back," and it was in a relationship with a woman who thought that I was really a good guy, but I had a lot of potential to be a great guy. And here's her list of the things I needed to work on. And because I had the belief, I had a matching belief. I'm pretty good. I have a lot of potential, but I need a lot of work. I had like a needs improvement sign in my psyche. So I bought it, and I just started to try to shapeshift into who she thought I could be and should be. And let's say that included changing my wardrobe so that I looked more masculine in her eyes. And I used to wear a lot of colorful clothing and had a lot of fun with self-expression with my wardrobe. And I threw it all out and started dressing to please her. And gradually I lost this edge that I call masculinity, this aliveness through the people pleasing. And it was only when we parted ways that I began to see how much I had lost myself in that relationship.
If I may ask, when you parted ways, was one of her reasons, or I don't know who broke up with whom, but was it one of the reasons because you didn't finally realize your potential, you didn't match the potential that she had for you?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. We had a child together, and she wanted more of a traditional. She wanted more safety and more protection from her man. Sure. And I gave as much as I could. It just wasn't enough. And it was really because we just weren't supposed to be together at that point. Yeah. I don't see anybody at fault. Yeah. But I really got down on myself. I was like, oh God, this proves it. I'm not man enough. And that actually led me to a dark night of the soul, which led me to start writing this book, which became my pathway into the light.
Yes.
my pathway out of well, I still have self-doubt, but
Will do.
I was steeped in it for like a decade.
Yes. During that dark night of the soul, often we sometimes we get lost in that. And that dark night of the soul can be longer, it can be multiple nights. But in that, there's always hope. And so it's the opportunity to realize trouble is inevitable, but misery is optional. And so when life
Oh,
happens
I
to all
love
of us,
that, James.
what do we do with that? And so when we recognize what we call radical acceptance, we recognize these are the facts today. I don't know what they mean. I don't want to go through it again, but these are the facts. Now, what do I do with it? And so in that dark night of the soul, you found that you answered that question, what do I do with this? And it's so important that people remember that, because in order to move through the dark night of the soul, you have to ask yourself, now what? What do I do next? But if we say this situation defines me, we then become that. And in that
Yes.
definition, we no
Yes.
longer can become the person that we're supposed to be, or that live in
Yes.
the potential that we're supposed to have or be.
Yes. Yeah. So I experienced my own one-person pity party, and I experienced that. Now what? I think I got bored with depression. I got
Yeah. Yeah.
bored with my own story about how limited and how dysfunctional I was. And I literally woke up one day and said, okay, what's next? What's
Wow.
next? This is not the last chapter of my life.
What's interesting is that the 24 hours prior to that, so you said you woke up and you felt this way. So let's say that 8 hours before that, you probably went to sleep and had a different mindset. And then when you awoke, something happened. What was that pivotal moment that allowed you to change and be like, I'm done with this?
Yeah, I don't want to misconstrue. It wasn't
Of course.
one day, one
Okay.
moment. That makes a good story, but no, it was a gradual dawning
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of hope and
Yes.
vision. A lot of things along the way helped me. I just cried so much during that time, and I see tears as a cleansing agent.
Yes, they are.
And it was like
Yes.
these thunderstorms were going through me, and old abandonment issues and rejection stuff from childhood. It was all coming up through the guise of this grieving process.
Mm.
And I dumped it. I just dumped enough water that the skies came out eventually.
Yes. Yes. When you think
It's like a
about
natural process.
we use the metaphor of the dark night of the soul. Well, we can transition that into the dawn. So the dawn, the sun doesn't just come up and boom, and there it is. So for you, the transition of having that sunlight come in, we can't see the UV rays that happened in the morning, but that's really how we wake up. The sunlight that we can't even see on the light spectrum affects our eyes, which causes us to start to wake up. And so it's interesting that we can use that metaphor as far as the sunlight was there, the dawn was there, and then eventually when the sunlight hits you, boom, everything started to change for you. I wanted to tell people
Yeah.
really fast. So many scientists believe that there are three different types of tears. You have your lubricating tears, you have your stress tears,
Yes.
and you have your emotional tears. The way it works is whatever we think about determines what we feel. What we feel determines how our body responds. So your perception and thoughts about what was happening allowed your emotions to come out, and your body had to release that. So emotions are energy, and so energy has to leave our body. Some people yell, some people scream, some people hit things, which is energy expulsion. In other words, a removal of it. So for you, the expression of the pain and suffering came out through your tears. And so your thoughts created your emotions created the energy, which were part of your emotional tears, and then it came out. So that's how you cleansed yourself. So that's why people say real men don't cry. And I'm thinking, well, real men do cry because that's why they're healthier, because they don't have all the toxicity or the toxic elements in the body. So for you, whether you realize it or not, it was a beautiful way for you to express yourself as you're on your journey through what is truly masculine for you by allowing yourself to cry, which is probably one of the most healing things you can give yourself, or healing parts of your life that most people don't realize are so helpful.
Absolutely. Uh, Before I even learned, or shall I say, relearned how to cry,
Uh-huh.
I wrote a little prayer
Uh-huh.
that I believe helped open the floodgates.
Yeah.
And it goes like this. Wanna let life touch me, wanna let life move me deep, wanna let life stir me from an ancient sleep, wanna let life touch me, wanna let life move me deep, wanna let life stir me from an ancient sleep. May I laugh all my laughter, may I cry all my tears, may I love the rain as deeply as the sun when it clears. May I laugh all my laughter, cry all my tears, may I love the rain as deeply as the sun when it clears. Ooh. And that's just the beginning of the song, but that was my
Yeah.
primary
That's
prayer. I
powerful.
recognized at a young age that I could only be as happy as I let myself
Yeah.
be sad at times.
Yes. Yes.
You can't just have
Yes.
one thing and suppress the other.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I appreciate you sharing that piece, and it's very profound. And I love the fact, I don't think you knew this about me, but I'm also a musician too. So to be able for you to express that in such a beautiful way, I think it's a natural gift and a beautiful gift. So thank you
Thank
for
you,
sharing that with us.
James.
When you recognize that you have the one side of you, and you can't have the other, I mean, that's the full embodiment of accepting yourself. And so realizing that the things that people say you shouldn't be or should be, I mean, that allows you to say, I just who I am. I have my strengths and I have my areas that I'm of growth. And then
Yes.
I think people really struggle. I like to tell people that my viewers my listeners who can't see me right now, my hands are put apart about a foot apart. So what I like to tell people is like on the right side, that's our light side. And the darker side is the other part of us, but we're a full spectrum. And so when that spectrum moves and we go throughout life, the light part of us is already going to move forward. That's just our natural inclinations. But the darker side of us, is that we're lightly or very loosely, the darker side of us is that part of us that is the part that self-develops. So as that comes along, what was once healthy for me 10 years ago, maybe the darker side of me now, because I've moved on, I moved forward in my light side. So it's important to realize we're a spectrum. We're not just one person. So they have, Jung called us we have the light and the shadow. So the shadow part would be that darkness side of us, a part that people don't really see, but that is just as beautiful and as important as the rest of us. And so it is important that people realize when you accept the things that the world says isn't okay for you, but you understand how it makes sense for you. It's your foundation for how you grow. So when you see something you don't like because it's not healthy for you specifically, that is when you're allowed to change it. But you wouldn't see it if you didn't accept that first part of you, that shadow part of you that is very important for who you are as well.
I used to think about self-acceptance and self-love as, well, I'll do that once I become really good, mature, well-behaved. And I realized I was going to wait a lifetime. And like,
We all do.
part of me is an asshole, part of me is an angel, and there's everything in between. And self-love isn't becoming more of an angel and overcoming the asshole part of me. Self-love is getting rid of the labels completely.
Yes.
And just
Yes.
loving life, loving what is,
Yes.
instead of having to divide myself up into good parts and bad parts, shadow and light, evolved and not quite evolved. It's just, it's all God. And that's my word. You can call it all lovable, all precious, whatever.
It's funny. I could be in my spiritual devotions, and I'm just having a great connection with God, who's also my higher power. And all of a sudden, I could be. Let me back up. I could be driving a car, and I'm singing this song, feeling so connected to God. And someone cuts me off, and I may cuss them out, and I laugh because I'm like, first off, that's so interesting to see the juxtaposition, in other words, comparison between here I am, this great spiritual part of me, and all of a sudden the other part of me, and I laugh because it's who I am, and so I strive to be the full embodiment of who I am. But it is interesting to see those different sides. And I'm like, okay, well, that's who I am today. And so in that, I find the humor in that as it's quite
James,
hilarious when you fully
you're my
accept
muse
yourself.
right now. And you reminded me of a song I wrote when somebody cut me off on a freeway and I got so angry. And I just had to pull over and do something with my anger. And so what I did was I wrote this song.
The energy. Huh?
And I think you'll enjoy it. It has a little 12-step humor in it. God grant me the serenity to accept the assholes you send to me. Like Captain Picard, I ask of you, God, to make it so that I can let go of this need to be right, the thrill of a fight. If I had rabies, I might give 'em a bite. God, hear my call, send a grain of your salt, so I can take myself with some light. Now let's skip to the end of the song, because we don't have a lot of time. The end of the song is, God, I'm down on my knee. No, wait. God, grant me the serenity to accept the asshole inside of me. For hard as I try to be a non-judging guy, sometimes I'm just looking through my anal eyes. God, I'm down on my knees, where I'm starting to see that calling others asshole is a self-diagnosis. And I'd rather set myself and everyone free by loving all God's assholes unconditionally. When you learn how to drive, you holy child of God.
Oh, that is hysterical. That's too funny. It is funny because in that moment, you have the opportunity to say, okay, this is happening to me. What am I learning about myself right now? And so that's basically what your prayer was saying as far as, allow me to accept the things I can't control. But it also gives you insight into why your response was that way. So if I'm realizing I don't have any patience right now, okay, well, that's an opportunity for me to practice patience. And so every event in our life is an opportunity for us to grow and learn from something. So when you simply
Absolutely.
ask yourself, what am I learning about myself right now? That's either an opportunity for you to be like, wow, James, I'm really proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And other parts of myself that says, okay, well, clearly I need to practice patience, or I have the opportunity to practice patience. So what am I going to do about that? If I don't want to practice patience, okay, well, I'll have another test that's going to happen
How
probably
about
5 minutes later, where I
I
get an opportunity to practice again.
how about I practice being patient with my impatience? Isn't that a good
There we
place
go.
to start?
Exactly.
There's always something to be
Yes,
patient
it
with.
is.
Hey, I don't want to be patient right
Yes.
now. I'd rather just vent my frustration. Well, that's
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
Let's just hold that and see that that's okay
Yes.
as well. And we'll get
Yes.
through it
Exactly.
faster if we don't judge ourselves.
In your book, Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them, what is this book specifically about besides the obvious topic?
Everything that men are going through these days, the rapidly changing roles. I,
Mm-hmm.
when I was in the middle of writing this book, I was sitting on a park bench, and some guy smoking a cigar said, "The ultimate male bonding question. So, what do you do?" You know, and I said, "Well, I'm a writer." And I said, "What are you writing?" And I'm writing a book on masculinity, and he said, "Tell me some things about it." And I said, "Well, first of all, it's about being whole brained. We have a left side of the
Yes.
brain, which is
Yes.
the yang, the masculine energy,
Mm-hmm.
and we all have a right side of the brain, which is yin and feminine receptive side of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And most men don't develop that side because the culture says, no, you got to be manly in certain ways." And he said, "Why would anyone ever want to develop their feminine side? It's
Interesting.
emasculating." And I had to go home and look up that word because I hadn't really understood what it meant.
Yeah.
Emasculating.
Yeah.
And that was like, this is the whole reason I'm writing the book, because there's such
Yeah. Exactly.
a popularity in this culture of men are supposed to look like this, sound like this. John
Mm-hmm.
Wayne,
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Tate is a current role model for a lot of young
Mm-hmm.
men. And it really, like, the book is for anyone who has distaste when they see Andrew Tate in action and recognize,
Mm-hmm.
no, real men cry. Real men are brave enough to be
Yes, they do.
vulnerable. There's
Yes.
there is something masculine about courage. And some men
Yes.
express it at the gym when they put more weights on
Mm-hmm.
than they're comfortable with. They get this juicy burst of adrenaline, of what is it? Testosterone. That's the masculine
Mm-hmm.
hormone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can get
Yeah.
testosterone. We can get a burst of courage and masculinity by going into the gym of our inner world and getting to know ourselves in
Yes.
scary, shady areas where we usually keep the lid on our shadow. So the book is
Yes.
inspiring men to get interested in what's under the hood. Most men know more about what's under the hood of their cars than what's under their hood of their psyches.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that as well, because many times people think when someone's courageous, it means that they're brave. Well, courageous doesn't necessarily mean they're brave per se, because you can still be very fearful. Like, I can be so afraid to do something, but I find the courage, the opportunity to do something. And so often people think there's no fear in courage, but there is.
Yeah.
There's lots of fear. And so it's important to realize that when we do something that's courageous or brave, you can still be fearful, have a lot of fear
Oh,
about it, but you do it regardless.
it wouldn't
And
be
so there's a
courage.
dialectic, what we call.
To me,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
courage is fear combined with the willingness to move forward anyway.
yes.
Take the
Yes.
fear away and it's not courage.
Yeah. So that's why when people, or if they want to do something, remember, it's okay to be afraid. It's just, what do you do with that? So you can still be courageous and still do the act and still be afraid, and both are true. And I think that's important that people realize that it doesn't have to be one or the other. In psychology, we have what's called a dialectic. It's a fancy word that means two
Or
opposing things can exist at the same time. So
exactly.
you have the courage and you have the fear, and boom,
Yeah.
you can still do it. So all are
Yeah.
true as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you another question here. So when I look at this book here, The Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them, what are some of the, we have probably 2 more minutes. What is one of the biggest, I'm sure there are many, biggest takeaways that this book offers?
Encouragement. I love the word encouragement. If my stories, my humor, my comedy, the raw vulnerability of my sharing myself, it is all designed to encourage men and women to face their fears, to dive and be interested in what's under the hood. There's a lot of chapters that encourage people to encourage themselves. This is classic self-help. How do you speak to yourself? Does it give you courage when you hear your inner voice in the morning? Do you feel like it's lifting you, or do you feel like it's discouraging? And if there's any guilt or shame or disapproval or criticism, chances are you're not motivated by that voice. So the book is full of
That's a really good
tools and
point.
practical technology for how to start speaking to yourself in a way that encourages you, gets you connected to courage, so you live your life the way you want to.
I really like your entry point when it comes to that, because we all know when we're talking to someone, we feel after the conversation's over, like, I feel really good about that. But we all, after those other people who we speak to, we're like, okay, I don't want to talk to them again. Well, I love the fact that that's how you remind yourself, like, are you encouraging yourself or not? I mean, it's a basic concept, but it's a very profound concept. And so I'm glad that people can relate with that. I can relate with that. So like, okay, I don't like how I feel right now because what am I saying to myself? And so I'm really glad to hear that you help people recognize their self-talk and help them change that self-talk, because that's where change starts.
Yeah, baby.
What's next for you? So you have a book, Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them. What's next on your journey? Do you know?
Playing a lot of tennis and pickleball and a lot of music. I live in Mexico. I don't feel ambition right now. I'm resting.
Okay.
I'm relaxing.
I totally get that.
I'm not even waiting for the next lightning strike. I'm not waiting for anything. I'm just living life and enjoying the hell out of it. I have a private practice. It brings in enough income for me to just live a stress-free life. And that's been my goal all along, is how do I live with a minimum of stress and a maximum of peace, love, and joy.
Well, you are a fantastic role model for that. So I really appreciate that. So Scott, Grace, thank you so much. If my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you and to purchase your book, Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them, where will they find all this information online?
Sure. Well, Amazon.com, you look up Scott Grace, Mindful Masculinity. And my website is a way to stay connected to me, www.scottsongs.com, SCOTTSONGS.com. Facebook, Scott K. Grace, and YouTube. I'm constantly putting my creativity out there. So please feel free to enjoy me. I enjoy me. And it gets lonely sometimes when other people don't.
Well said. My viewers and listeners also know that if they can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmiller@lifeology.com, and I'll connect you with Scott Grace and all of his information. One more time, his book is Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them. Scott, once again, thank you for all your wisdom, your expertise, and your music. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, James.